Welcome to Goodfellow Podcasts. This episode is kindly supported by the Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners, the Auckland faculty. I'm Dr. Louise Kugler, and today I welcome to the podcast Kendra Hill and Inspector Kirsten Price. Today we are discussing firearms licensing, what the primary care team need to know. Kendra is a Senior Partnerships Advisor at Te Tari Puriki Firearms Safety Authority and holds the partnership's health and wellbeing portfolio. Kendra was previously with New Zealand Police and has been in her current role for the last year. Kirsten is the Resolutions Manager, leading the Resolutions team within Te Tari Puriki. Kirsten has been with the New Zealand Police for over 25 years, holding various frontline, CIB and supervisory roles. Kia ora to you both and welcome to the podcast. So today we are providing an update on firearms licensing. The changes are intended to prevent harm caused by the possession and use of firearms in the community. On the 24th of December 2020, changes to the Arms Act 1983 came into effect, meaning that health professionals and practitioners must consider notifying police of health concerns related to their firearms access, and police will notify health practitioners when their patient has been issued with a firearms license. We're going to discuss the roles and responsibilities today of the health practitioner and of the police, how to make a notification and what happens when a notification is made. So Kendra, I wonder if you could just fill us in with the background of the Firearms Safety Authority, or Te Tari Puriki.
Thanks, Louise, for the introduction. So Te Tari Puriki, the Firearms Safety Authority, is focused on making our communities safer by overseeing the legitimate possession and use of firearms in New Zealand. We seek to be a world leader in firearms regulatory services, and our vision is that the possession and use of firearms in Aotearoa is the safest in the world. We launched last year on the 30th of November, and we provide the public face for police's strengthened firearms regulatory authority and capability. There's been significant investment by government in Budget 2022 to enable our transformation to a modernised firearms regulatory system. Te Tari Puriki itself is a branded business unit within police, but with its own appropriation under Vote Police, meaning that we have ring-fence funding and resourcing. Te Tari Puriki operates within its own separate identity distinct from the main police organisation. We've been established to modernise, lead and operate a refreshed firearms regulatory framework, and Te Tari Puriki is responsible for delivering a more efficient and effective risk-based licensing system. We're all about engaging, educating and encouraging the safe possession and use of firearms in Aotearoa. The arms regulatory system currently supports around 240,000 firearms licence holders, so roughly 1 in every 20 New Zealanders. The Arms Act 1983 provides a regulatory framework which seeks to protect the public from harm that may be caused by the misuse of firearms. It confirms that owning a firearm is a privilege and allows fit and proper people to possess firearms for legal purposes, such as businesses, food gathering and recreational or sporting purposes. And it also manages and mitigates the risk of people becoming victims of firearms-related harm.
Thank you for that. Kirsten, I wonder if you can tell us about notification. So notification is compulsory, not for all health professionals, only for groups. So what groups does this legislation apply to, please?
Sure. The Arms Act 1983 interpretation of health practitioner is a health practitioner registered with the Medical Council of New Zealand, a nurse practitioner registered with the Nursing Council of New Zealand, a psychologist registered with the New Zealand Psychologists Board, or a duly authorised officer under the Mental Health Compulsory Assessment and Treatment Act 1992.
So Kirsten, then what about other health professionals, life coaches, counsellors, etc.? They don't fall under this. So what are their requirements?
That's right. Whilst these roles don't fall under the requirements of health practitioners per se under the Act, where these professionals do identify concerns for a firearms licence holder, I would recommend they make a notification via 111 or 105, depending on the seriousness of the concerns identified.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. Thinking now, Kendra, about a patient with a firearms licence. So how are we going to know if our patient has a firearms licence?
There's a couple of times that you might receive notification. So Te Tari Pūriki must notify the health practitioner when a new licence has been issued or a licence has been renewed. Firearms licence holders are also required to inform Te Tari Pūriki when they change health practitioner, and so you also will receive a notification at that point. However, probably don't assume that your patient is not a firearms licence holder just because you haven't received a notification from Te Tari Pūriki. Firearms licences are issued for either 5 or 10 years, and the health practitioner will be nominated by the licence holder. So a patient may choose to nominate someone other than their registered GP, as mentioned before, and patients may also change health practitioner without notifying us. So it's suggested to have firearms licence holder information as part of their social history on your patient management system, so the information can be transferred at any point as a part of the medical record. I guess for your awareness as well, a little bit about our licence holders. 60% of them are over the age of 50, over 90% of them are men. The largest concentrations of firearms licence holders are in Canterbury and Southern Districts, followed by Central North Island. So as you might expect, they are a little bit more concentrated outside of New Zealand's largest urban areas. Firearms are also used for a range of different activities, for example, recreation, business, sport, pest control, food gathering. We know many of our licence holders are part of the rural community, so they may have firearms on the farm for pest control. So that's just a little bit of a snapshot of what our licence holders might look like. But again, it's best to not assume that your patient isn't a firearms licence holder.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thinking about the responsibilities of the health provider now, what are our responsibilities when we're looking after our patients? You mentioned that we should document in the patient's notes under social history, but I think it's important to also have a pop-up alert so that every time a patient is in contact with the provider, they're aware that they have a firearms license. That would make it very visible, as well as a highlighted classification. But where else and what else are we responsible for? Kirsten, perhaps you could answer that.
Sure, Louise. I think it's really important for a health practitioner to be alert for changes in health conditions that may raise concerns in respect of a firearms licence holder. The health practitioner themselves must consider notifying Te Tari Pūriki as soon as practicable if you have attended or been consulted in respect of a person who you know or have reason to believe is a firearms licence holder, and consider that the health condition of the licence holder is such that at the current time the firearms licence holder is a risk to themselves or others, so should not have access to firearms themselves.
So, Kirsten, you mentioned health conditions, and this category is quite broad. So are there specific conditions that we should be aware of?
So by way of background, health conditions should be viewed in the context of risk and with regard to personal and public safety. A health practitioner should consider whether the person should not be permitted to use or possess a firearm or should be subject to limitations per se. Section 24A(1)(h) of the Arms Act 1983 refers to symptoms of a mental or physical illness or injury that may affect a person's ability to safely possess firearms. Examples of relevant health conditions may include, but not be limited to, depression, anxiety, or suicidal ideation, acute stress reactions, dementia, Alzheimer's, or other cognitive impairment or traumatic brain injury, alcohol abuse or dependency, or terminal diagnoses. In the context of are they a risk to themselves or others, we are not wanting health practitioners to determine if someone is fit and proper to hold a firearms licence. Rather, we need enough information to determine if their mental or physical health might affect their judgment, behaviour, or cause them to be a risk to themselves or others.
Late last year, we did a webinar with the Royal New Zealand College of General Practitioners. We were joined by Dr. Kathy Stevenson and Dr. Jeremy Weber, where we actually went through some common scenarios that you may come across and how they might be approached. So you can find this on the college's website, and you can also find more information available on our website in the Health Practitioners tab as well.
Fantastic. Thank you both. So talking about notifying now, how do we notify the police and with what urgency?
If it's an emergency or an immediate concern, 111 is always going to be your best option. If it's a non-emergency, we would suggest notifying as soon as possible. We have the online form under our Health Practitioners tab on our website. That's the Te Tari Pūriki website. There's also a little bit more information on that page as well about when you might consider notifying.
Thank you. And what information do I need to include when making a notification, please, Kirsten?
If you're using the health practitioner reporting form on the Te Tari Puriki website, the patient name and date of birth is required, and there is also an option to attach information there. Your opinion that in the interests of individual or public safety, the person should not be permitted to use or possess firearms at the current time, or only if subject to certain conditions, the grounds on which your opinion is based, and whether you believe the licence holder poses an immediate or imminent danger of self-harm or harm to others. The grounds on which that opinion is based may include the nature of the person's health condition and how that is impacting on, or is likely to impact on, the licence holder and their ability to safely use and possess firearms. Only provide information that is relevant to your opinion.
So, Kirsten, when we make a notification, what happens next?
So the notification is received by the Firearms Resolutions team. A follow-up email acknowledging the report is sent in response to the notification which is received. In some cases, we may call the health practitioner to confirm the report and discuss the process from there. From our perspective, a notice of temporary suspension may be the preferred option in order to make the situation safe where this is required in response to the information received. At that point, the health practitioner is advised that their patient is unlicensed in terms of firearms licensing. The licence holder then has an opportunity to make submissions, which must include an updated health assessment. We need an updated health assessment covering the context of, are they currently a risk to themselves or others? In the event no submissions are received from the licence holder, or we still feel they are a serious risk and therefore not fit and proper to possess and use firearms, a revocation decision may be made, meaning they are unable to possess or use firearms for a period of 5 years. Alternatively, it may be the case, and it might be appropriate to discuss and offer that person an opportunity to surrender their firearms licence, which means the person is able to reapply for a firearms licence once they return to optimal health. If the submission and medical assessment satisfies us they are not an ongoing risk to themselves or others with respect to firearms, their firearms licence is reinstated and the health practitioner advised that their patient remains licensed. I think it's important to note we are not wanting health practitioners to determine if someone is fit and proper to hold a firearms licence. Rather, we need enough information to determine if the person's mental or physical health might affect their judgment, behaviour, or cause them to be a risk to themselves or others. The responsibility for determining a person's fitness and propriety for the purpose of firearms licensing does rest with Te Tari Puriki.
That's really good to know. So when we make a notification, is the health professional able to be identified? And we're disclosing confidential patient information. So what does that mean as far as breaking confidentiality and liability for the health practitioner?
A health practitioner is not liable to criminal, civil, or disciplinary proceedings by disclosing personal information in the course of performing any function under Section 92 in the Act, as long as that health practitioner is acting in good faith. So basically that means we don't have to disclose information where there be a risk to safety of the health professional, but generally we are going to disclose where that information came from. The notification when using the form on our website is free text, so it would be quite helpful to mention in there whether you have or haven't discussed the notification with your patient and whether you have any concerns around this.
So what if we have concerns, but perhaps they're not great enough to make us feel that we need to make a notification? What's our responsibilities here, or what can you advise us?
So as mentioned in the Act, you must consider notifying. So you may decide that while you have concerns about a person having access to firearms, they're not sufficient to warrant raising them with Te Tari Puriki at that point in time. In this case, you may still want to discuss with your patient their access to firearms. You may want to discuss with the patient that they have an obligation to talk to Te Tari Puriki, and we can talk to them about their options from there. This could result in conditions on their licence, such as storing them with another licence holder or looking into surrendering their licence and applying for it again at a later date when they're well. Or there are a range of different ways that this might be approached. You may also remind the patient that if their health circumstances deteriorate further and you have concerns about their safety or the safety of others, that in future you will need to make a notification. What we are aware of is that mental health issues are quite common, and we encourage anyone in this situation to seek medical help. Appropriate treatment and management of conditions is a better outcome than letting them get worse and resulting in a loss of licence. And this also demonstrates fit and proper behaviour going and seeking help.
So as a primary care practitioner, we're always concerned that our relationship with our patients may be compromised with making a notification. So do you have any tips and tricks about how to do this while still maintaining that relationship?
Checking in when you see your patient is super important. Making the topic a normal thing that comes up in conversation each time they are seen, so the person comes to expect this. Where concerns are identified, discussing with your patient the options which may be available to them. For example, their ability to be proactive and surrender their firearms licence and reapply once they become well with your support. If a person opts to surrender their firearms licence, they may continue to shoot under the supervision of a firearms licence holder, which I think is important for that firearms licence holder and for the health practitioner to be aware of.
So our patient comes to us following a notification asking for a medical certificate. What do we need to consider with this?
So a patient may come to you asking for a medical certificate even if you haven't made a notification. So this could be because they've been asked to provide this as a part of their application or due to a police matter that has occurred and Te Tari Pūriki has suspended their licence. The licence holder then has a period of time to gather information to support getting their licence back in the form of submissions. So if you're asked to provide a medical certificate, the information we're looking for is that which relates to the health condition that is or could be impacting on licence suitability for that person. When providing that, it would also be quite useful to have plain and simple language. Often we may not understand medical terminology or jargon, and otherwise we may need to come back to you.
Is there a particular form that we will have to fill in?
Good question, Louise. It would just generally be the usual medical certificate in the format that a health practitioner would use in their general day-to-day practice. It doesn't need to be on any particular form, just highlighting, obviously, the letterhead and signed off by the health practitioner concerned.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. So thank you both for your time today. I wonder, to conclude our podcast, some take-home messages for our listeners, please.
So the take-home messages from us are that possession and use of firearms in New Zealand is a privilege. Te Tari Pūriki's core functions are to effectively implement the firearms licensing system, to educate people and enable compliance with their legislative responsibilities, and to promote the safe and legitimate use of firearms.
In addition, I think it's important to note we are not wanting health practitioners to determine if someone is fit and proper to hold a firearms licence. Rather, we need enough information to determine if the person's mental or physical health might affect their judgment, behaviour, or cause them to be a risk to themselves or others. The responsibility for determining a person's fitness and propriety for the purpose of firearms licensing rests with Te Tari Pūriki.
Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. If you're a New Zealand GP, you can claim CPDs for listening to this podcast. You'll also find a list of resources that we've used to make this podcast on our website, goodfellowunit.org. Thank you for listening.